Good afternoon and welcome to the News Roundup for Tuesday, September 30th, 2025. I'm Bill Thomas, and here's what's happening right now. Shutdown. Time is up for the federal government. Jobs, services, and so much more on the line. Send in the troops. President Trump telling top military commanders to use our nation's crime-riddled cities as their training grounds. And we're no longer at peace. Germany's leader urgently warning that Russia is now actively waging war against European democracy. Also, the governor of Illinois sounding the alarm about the plan to deploy the National Guard to Chicago, and fans of a legendary American pop star are up in arms after shelling out big bucks for an intimate concert, only to find out they were attending a boring book lecture instead. All this and much more coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We kick things off today with the partisan stalemate in Washington, which is now threatening to wreak havoc on our entire nation by shutting down the federal government for an extended period of time. Right now, there's no deal in sight, with both parties in Congress refusing to compromise on their positions and the federal government running out of cash. While Republicans remain united behind a House bill which would keep the government up and running for another 7 weeks, Senate Democrats say they won't pass the measure until the GOP caves into their demands regarding additional funds for health care. In the meantime, President Trump and his allies, they're not blinking, and they're showing no signs of backing down, with the president warning that if push comes to shove, a shutdown will ultimately end up costing the Democrats a whole bunch of employees and programs which they really like. Of course, they're Democrats. Ever met a Democrat with a program they don't like? The White House recently telling federal agencies to prepare for the shutdown by getting ready to cut and even permanently fire a large chunk of their workforce. Now, as many as 4 million federal employees could eventually wind up going without a paycheck during a lengthy shutdown, including some members of both ICE and the National Guard. However, hundreds of thousands of people who are considered essential workers will still be required to show up for their jobs, including military personnel. Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid will continue regardless of what happens. However, the Department of Health and Human Services, they now plan to furlough more than 40% of their staff if there is an extended shutdown. Additionally, a number of airlines now warning that the government shutdown will completely disrupt our nation's air travel while simultaneously threatening the safety of passengers. Air travel, nothing trumps safety. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Now, fortunately, I have, and hopefully our editor Pranav will put this up over my shoulder, I happen to have an authentic pretend PhD in psychology, if we have my diploma handy. And here's what's up. I'm speaking to you now from a clinical perspective. Political temper tantrums can be a thing to behold, with crying and yelling, screaming, and a variety of additional annoying and highly disruptive behaviors. Politicians, and usually of the liberal bent, generally participate in these tantrums when they're tired, hungry, frustrated, and maybe a little bit bored. Unfortunately, Chuck Schumer and his band of tantrum-toting cohorts are having a conniption so vile that they're willing to shut down your government merely because they can't get everything they want and right now. A simple agreement to keep the government open and serving the country is all being held up over certain health care benefits, which liberals are absolutely laser focused on. And at one point, they'll have to back off, calm down, grow up, and find a respectable solution. Here's what liberals are not focused on. And this is something you'll be thinking about when the midterm elections come a-calling. As a result of this shutdown, tons of federal employees will be out of work. And I hope you don't have any travel plans, because the aviation industry could take a major hit. Democrats, this one's on you, and good luck at the polls. Now look, when the government hangs a big giant neon closed sign on the front door of the White House, the FAA, your Federal Aviation Administration, will most likely have to suspend hiring and training. And if the air traffic control towers aren't fully staffed, it might be mildly difficult for jet airliners to get clearance to land. Oh, and good luck trying to secure a clearance to depart. Hello, LaGuardia. We've been here on the ground for 3 or 4 days now. Hey, to be sure, a government shutdown means you will no longer be free to move about the cabin. Now, even if they shut the store down, the Roundup, yeah, we're still open for business. And share your thoughts and comments with us. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. I'm Bill, by the way. How are you? Over to producer Davey, that guy over there. He's all too happy to share some interesting emails with us. I'm sure people are a bit riled up. Davey, what do you got?
Yeah, Bill, nobody's too happy about this. That's for sure. Okay, let's start with Laura in Duluth, Minnesota.
Hello, Laura. What are you thinking about this one?
She says, I'm sick and tired of this stupid nonsense. Why can't these clowns get their act together and just do the job they're paid to do? It's time for term limits.
Yeah, it is time for term limits. And we do have term limits for certain people and the government, but our Democratic friends are not playing fairly right now. We're doing all we can to come up with some kind of a deal, a fair and equitable deal that makes everybody as happy as is entirely possible. But the Democrats, they are holding up the program. Appreciate you checking in. And David, who's up next?
Well, here's a message from a guy with a great name, David.
Hello, David.
In Albuquerque, New Mexico. And he says,
Yeah.
Maybe if we stop paying their salaries, those do-nothing hot-winded politicians would think twice about kicking the little guy in the teeth.
Yeah. It's okay to have a government shutdown if somebody else is out of work, but if a government shutdown put Chuck Schumer out of a gig, things would be changing real quick. You know, it's 100% impossible for everyone to get everything they want and at every juncture. But right now, again, it's the Democrats. They're working overtime to hamstring the process. Stop the federal government from doing the business of running our country. And they're acting like spoiled little brats. I say, knock it off, get your job done. I'll change things up just a bit now. Turn our attention to President Trump's rapidly expanding effort to safeguard our cities by calling on our nation's military troops to get the job done. The president addressing a mysterious gathering of top-level generals and admirals at a Marine Corps air base in Virginia, telling them that defending our homeland is the military's highest priority. I concur. And letting them know that they're free to use dangerous, crime-plagued American cities as their training ground. Sounds kind of peculiar. In his speech, Trump also claiming that his administration's widespread crackdown on crime in major cities absolutely necessary because right now they're basically unsafe places. The president also says he might soon call on our country's top military leaders to join his crusade because we're fighting what he calls a war from within, adding that we're facing an invasion from people inside our borders who are similar to a foreign enemy. Can't argue that. Goes on to say that moving forward, his administration has big plans to straighten out our country's troubled cities one by one, and then eventually he expects to call on a number of the military's top commanders to play a major role in orchestrating these missions. So far, the White House has deployed National Guard troops, as you know, to deal with crime and violence in L.A., my hometown right here. Also, Washington, D.C., that's Davey's hometown over there. Memphis as well. And earlier this week, the president announced plans to send troops to Portland with a number of other cities, such as Chicago, New Orleans, and New York now squarely on his radar. Absolutely. And meanwhile, Democrats claim that Trump's use of the military in American cities comes straight out of the authoritarian playbook. Well, apparently they're okay with drugs and looting and rioting and vicious crime and murder in a bunch of the big cities. Can't have law and order. By the way, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth also spoke to our nation's top military brass at the summit, telling them that our country's era of politically correct leadership, it's now over. It's done with. And that if they don't like the way he's doing things, from now on, they're free to take a hike, maybe get a job as a security guard at a local mall. And final thought, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. You know, it's an interesting narrative, and I think I get what 47 is saying, but he might want to backpedal just a bit and rethink that one. You know, many of our big U.S. cities, absolutely dangerous, crime-riddled, and a terrible national embarrassment. Chicago desperately needs help. New York as well. Portland is getting some help from the National Guard, as you know. And here in L.A., the Trump administration bailed the city out back in June during a tragic period of civil unrest. It got ugly out here. To suggest, however, that our armed forces should go to troubled cities on some kind of training mission, that telegraphs a bad message to our many global enemies that we have a military which is somehow less than fully trained and ready for any contingency. You know, our military-industrial complex should already be well-trained, ready to take on any threat from any enemy anywhere and at any time, here at home or abroad. You know, when Russia, China, North Korea, maybe Iran, and other rogue nations hear that we need to deploy our troops to our very own crime-riddled U.S. cities for training, to me, that's bad messaging. I don't like it, and I ain't signing off on it. For now, drop us a note with your thoughts, your comments, maybe your questions. You'll catch us at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, for my money, this is a hot topic, and what are folks saying?
Okay, Bill, we start with Saul in Trenton, New Jersey.
Afternoon, Saul. State your business, sir.
Saul says, using our country's military on U.S. soil is unconstitutional. The only thing lawless around here is the administration.
Well, it's not unconstitutional. The president is doing all he can to uphold his oath to the Constitution to protect the borders. We are within those borders. We have to protect our own cities. Long before we should send our men and women off to war to somewhere across the planet, first, let's take care of what's happening right here in the USA. We've got a number of huge problems in a number of big cities, a bunch of small cities as well, and the president is doing what the mayors and the governors of the states should have been doing but have failed to do. He's taken the towns back. He's doing a great job. Highly constitutional. You're absolutely wrong. David, who's up next?
Okay, Bill, here's a different view from Logan in Rapid City, South Dakota.
Bring it on, Logan.
Logan says, everyone knows that our cities have become crime-plagued sewers filled with drug addicts and violent lunatics.
Yeah.
And now we finally have someone in charge with the backbone to clean them up. Godspeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, the president should stay on the trail. Look at the needs of our nation's big cities. He's doing that right now. Deploy fully trained federal troops to assist local law enforcement take the streets back. You got to take the cities back one by one and bring the U.S. back to its full and beautiful glory, one city and one state at a time. Shift gears now and turn our focus to a dire warning, which is coming from a top NATO ally concerning Russia's dangerous escalation of their merciless war against Ukraine. The leader of Germany now declaring that Europe is no longer at peace, saying that right now Moscow is actively fighting a war against both democracy and freedom throughout the entire continent. The German chancellor's foreboding comments come as a growing number of NATO allies are now sounding the alarm over Russia's brazen and deep incursions into their airspace. Among those highly concerned countries, we got Denmark now banning all civil drone flights in their nation following a number of recent unexplained aerial sightings near their highly secure military facilities. You and I know exactly who those drones belong to. They're also currently holding joint defense exercises with Ukraine in order to learn the best way to deal with Russian drones. In the meantime, Russia, they're showing no evidence that they plan to call a halt to their brutal invasion of Ukraine anytime soon. And in fact, it's pretty much just the opposite, with Russian President Vladimir Putin just signing an order to draft 135,000 new soldiers into his armed forces by the end of the year. Making matters worse, an expert on the Russian economy now warns that Moscow is not making any plans for peace, claiming they're currently making financial arrangements to fund their fighting in Ukraine for the next few years. Meanwhile, a former high-ranking British security official now warning that her nation is likely already at war with Moscow as well, pointing to a large number of alleged Russian cyber attacks and covert operations on UK soil. And there's a lot to take in there. Really let that sink in. Additionally, President Trump says that he's now stationing a couple of American submarines near the Russian coast just in case, while the American envoy to Ukraine says that Europe has not seen this kind of industrial strength fighting since the end of World War II. And nobody's talking right now about a Cold War, but I feel it. Feels exactly like a Cold War, and it's brewing real quick. A final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. All the signs for those who take the time, stop and read them, they're abundantly clear. They're easy to understand, and the whole world should stop and take note. Germany issuing an alarming statement by saying that Europe and Russia are not at peace. We know that. And now for those with their heads buried in the sand, the chancellor's words are brutally impactful. But for anyone who's been even casually watching Russia, this should come as no surprise. Putin's war with Ukraine has been raging for nearly 4 years now, and if there was ever any glimmer of hope that he'd soon back down, agree to a ceasefire and end his battle, those hopes have all been crushed now with his most recent announcement. Having no concern about sending more of his countrymen to an early grave, Putin is now mandating 135,000 Russians between the ages of 18 and 30 to join the army. And clearly, he is trying to grow his war and perhaps even expand it. In addition to destroying Ukraine, Putin has recently used his drones to violate airspace over Poland, Estonia, and Romania. And to the casual observer, he's merely testing the waters to see just how much he can get away with. Putin will continue pushing, pillaging, destroying, and murdering. But at one point, he's going to go too far. He will push too hard. And my gut tells me he will be met with something he never counted on. Drop us an email now with your thoughts, comments, questions as well. And we're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Seems to get worse day by day. David, let's go to the email bag and talk to some folks.
Okay, Bill, let's see what the people have to say here. We have Vicky in Charleston, South Carolina weighing in.
Afternoon, Vicky.
Vicky says, right now, China, Russia, and their flunkies are doing all they can to ruin the West, and we need to start explaining it to them before it's too late.
There's nothing left to explain. They know exactly what they're doing. China knows what they're doing. So does North Korea, Iran, Russia. They're all in cahoots right now. And that new global order is just going to keep growing and keep expanding. Something has got to break. And I think something will break very soon. I'm talking about the next several weeks. I think we're in for a very big change. Can't put my finger on exactly what it is, but I feel it in my gut. I feel it in my soul. Vic, appreciate you checking in. Davey, who's up next?
Okay, Bill, here's a bit of a different view from John, who's writing to us today from Great Falls, Montana.
Very good. Hello, John.
John says, it's not our business. Whatever happened to America first?
Well, we are America first. I think Donald Trump is more America first than any president I can think of, save Ronald Reagan. America first. However, when the world starts imploding and collapsing, we got to all come together. The allies have to stick together. And just some food for thought. You know, our ships, our subs, our aircraft strategically deployed all over the world. And the U.S., in my estimation, prepared for anything which the evil dictator tries to inflict upon the planet. Also, if China thinks they benefit from a potential World War III, they're tragically mistaken. They should be on board with us, and they should be doing all they can to stop Russia's evil dictator before it's too late, and the clock is ticking. Now, some additional headlines we are keeping a very close watch on here in the News Roundup newsroom. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker warning that 100 National Guard troops could soon be heading for Chicago, saying that the Department of Homeland Security officially requesting those troops to help protect federal ICE agents who are currently operating in the wind-defied city. Also, some troubling information concerning the assassination of political activist Charlie Kirk, and a new report revealing that the Utah college where the murder took place failed to put in place a number of critical public safety precautions, which have become common security safeguards at similar high-profile events throughout the country. And Charlie Kirk has also been very vocal. He was very vocal in recent months that when he travels, he does travel with his own security detail. So something did go wrong in Utah, and I'm sure at the end of the investigation that will all be brought to bear. And turning now to the war in the Middle East, President Trump saying that Hamas has only 3 or 4 more days to accept his comprehensive peace plan, and warning the terror group that if they ultimately reject the deal, they're facing a very sad end. I'll return now to the world of business and a quick glance at a couple of stories certainly making headlines in finance, commerce, and a bunch more. Petroleum giant ExxonMobil announcing plans to slash nearly 2,000 jobs from their global workforce as they look to trim their overhead amid lower prices for crude oil worldwide. Well, if they're lower prices, why am I paying more? You're cutting jobs, you're making more dough, you're making record profits, and I'm still paying close to $5 a gallon for unleaded. Here in L.A., it doesn't make any sense. Also, some encouraging news to share with you now concerning our country's largest food delivery service, San Francisco-based DoorDash, saying they plan to greatly expand their offerings by adding both restaurant reservations and robot deliveries to their menu. And finally, some dreadful news for China. Officials in the communist regime now admitting that China's factory activity for the past 6 months in a row, the past half a year, it's continued to decline. Experts saying that trade tensions with the U.S. are partly to blame for the deadline. Meanwhile, in a related note, both China and North Korea now agreeing to further deepen their ties as they remain united in their effort to oppose our country at every juncture. And now it is time for the lighter side of news, where we take a quick gander at a couple of stories which are guaranteed to make you grin, giggle, or maybe even wiggle. And out of the corner of my eye, I see engineer Jamie. She's wiggling a little bit. Stop that wiggling over there. Hey, right off the bat, a number of furious music buffs absolutely fuming after dropping big bucks to catch an intimate concert in New York City from pop legend Lionel Richie, only to show up and discover that the musician, he was there, but he wasn't making music. He was there to talk about his new book. If I want to read a book, I'll read a dictionary. I want to hear some music. Some folks say they spent more than $1,000 to check out the gig before realizing they'd gotten themselves into and letting Richie have it by heckling him to pieces, kind of embarrassing the poor guy, before storming the box office and demanding their money back. Eventually, Lionel Richie weighed in by saying if you're looking for a concert, you kind of came to the wrong place, with his team adding that the event was always billed as a Q&A and blaming the angry audience members for not reading the language on the advertisement. Well, maybe, but it wouldn't have killed them to sing a song or two. And kind of an interesting story, but there are some unanswered questions. Now, Lionel Richie used to sing with a group way back when called the Commodores before he became a solo act. And producer Davey, I got to ask you, From the Commodore's era, can you just confirm that at the New York non-concert, he did not sing Brick House, 3 Times a Lady, or the big hit Sail On, and any of the other big Commodore's hits?
Bill, it was a book talk and a lecture, not a concert. He did not sing.
He didn't sing those songs. Okay. And then from his solo career, can you also confirm that he did not perform Endless Love or All Night Long, Say You, Say Me, and Dancing on the Ceiling?
Bill, it was a lecture, a talk. There was no singing.
He could have sung a song or two. By the way, Dancing on the Ceiling, we didn't care for the song so much, but if you ever saw that video, I don't know if we have video of the video, but Lionel Richie is actually dancing on the ceiling, upside down somehow, and it's real. It's authentic. No special effects. This guy is better than Fred Astaire or Michael Jackson. He's a heck of a dancer. Better than Gene Kelly, I dare say. Now, look, maybe it's just me, and this sounds like a bargain at any price. Anytime you buy tickets to see a pop star not perform songs from 2 different eras, then the way I see it, you got 2 for the price of 1, and you made out like a bandit. Just amazing. And good job, Lionel Richie. And Davey, a question for you. Wasn't Lionel Richie also at one time married to Madonna?
I don't believe that's true, Bill. Is that? I don't remember that.
Well, maybe it was Guy Ritchie, the movie guy. I knew it was Guy Ritchie or Lionel Richie. I knew there was a Ritchie involved somehow. Guy Ritchie, Lionel Richie, or maybe Richie Cunningham. The bottom line is I got the Ritchie part right, and I got the part about Madonna at one time being married right. All right, making the journey now from New York to Springfield for yet another media disappointment. And here's what's going on. Some fantastic news for fans of America's favorite cartoon family who are returning once again to the silver screen. 20th Century Studios, they say that in just a couple of years, you'll be able to catch Homer, Bart, Lisa, and the whole Simpsons gang at a movie theater near you. I'll wait for it to stream. They say they're planning for the blockbuster to hit the big screen nearly 20 years after their first Simpsons movie, which lit up the box office when it was released back in 2007. In the meantime, if you just can't wait to see the residents of Springfield in the theater, you can always catch them on the tube. The longest animated show in history just kicked off season number 37. 37 years on the air. They've already been renewed for another 3-year hitch as well. And here's the deal. You know, after 37 seasons and 1 full-length movie, if it's not too much to ask, can we maybe just sort of move along? I get it. Homer likes pork chops and donuts, and Bart's a troublemaker. Every storyline has been exhausted, and on my mind, it's done now. It's over. By the way, Davey, do you ever catch that Simpsons episode where Homie and Marge and Bart and Lisa and Moe the bartender, the whole cast, they got eaten by a shark? Remember that one?
No, Bill, I don't remember that one at all.
Right. You don't remember it because it never happened. They didn't get eaten by a shark. They jumped the shark a long time ago. You know, even the Flintstones knew when it was time to call it a day. Enough's enough. All right, thoughts and comments, fire away. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, it's all you to the email bag. Who's up first?
Okay, Bill, you know, these are some interesting topics for people to weigh in on. And here's one from Sid in Tallahassee, Florida.
Hello, Sid. What's cooking in Tallahassee?
Sid says the ads for the Lionel Richie event spelled it out clearly.
Yeah.
Anyone with a complaint needs to go back to night school and learn how to read.
Yeah, perhaps. But look, when you go to a Lionel Richie event, the least he could do is pull out a guitar or have someone wheel a piano in, do a song or two. He's Lionel Richie. He's a legend from the Commodores, from his solo career, from his TV projects to all the great songs he's written. You're Lionel Richie. You're in Manhattan. Give the crowd what they came for. They made you a star. Time to give back the love. All right, who's up next?
Here's one from Ted in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Bill.
What you got, Ted?
He says, why would anyone spend that kind of dough on a concert ticket? I don't care if Elvis comes back. It just ain't worth it.
Yeah, especially when you can stream any song you ever wanted to hear from Lionel Richie live or recorded on YouTube or Spotify or anywhere else. And what was the bottom line for tickets, Davey? Was it several $100s?
I think people were forking over hundreds upon hundreds of bucks, Bill.
Yeah, maybe for the Beatles, I'd fork out hundreds and hundreds. Not for Lionel Richie. I love some Lionel Richie, but not for hundreds and hundreds. One more, we got to wrap it up.
Okay, Bill, here's one from Betty in Providence, Rhode Island.
Hiya, Betty.
Betty says the first Simpsons movie is a classic, and as we all know, sequels are always better. I can't wait to see it in IMAX.
No, listen, you make one movie and you call it a day. If you do it right the first time, you don't need to make a sequel. For example, The Godfather or Star Trek. One and done, and then you move along. And now it is time for us to call it a wrap on the Tantalizing Tuesday edition of the Big News Roundup. But before we go, and as we do each and every day here on the program, we share with you a very notable quote. And these words of wisdom, they come to us today from a little-known singer, a lounge act named Frank Sinatra, who once upon a time said, "The best revenge is massive success." Also known by his nickname Old Blue Eye, Sinatra was a legendary American singer and actor who is widely considered to be one of the most popular entertainers of the entire 20th century. Also, Frank Sinatra, Dave, I'm a big fan. Did I ever tell you that?
No, I didn't know that, Bill.
I love Frank Sinatra and that big, big hit, I Left My Heart in San Francisco. When he sings that, Davey, I'm on the floor.
Bill.
Heart.
That's
San
Tony
Francisco.
Bennett, not Frank Sinatra.
No, but they're both singers, though, right?
Yeah, they're both singers, but...
Okay, then I got it half right. You're always attacking me. And now it is time for us to bust on out. But before we do, don't forget the News Roundup motto. Ask not what your podcast can do for you. Come on, hunker down. Ask what you can do for your podcast. And here's what you can do. Simply subscribe to the program so you never miss even a single episode. And now it does look like our time is officially up. So have an awesome day today. Please stay safe. Sorry about that whole government shutdown thingamajiggy. It'll all pan out. Be patient. Give it some time. Let's all continue to watch out for one another. And with that, I'll implore upon Engineer Jamie to please dim the lights. Let's fade to black. And we'll see you right back here tomorrow afternoon. Dave, are you sure that I Left My Heart in San Francisco was not Frank Sinatra?
That wasn't Frank Sinatra, Bill. That was somebody else.
Yeah.